So good morning and welcome to the session on the execution framework for the EOSC platform. And as titled, this is the kind of the big denouement for EOSC, the EOSC platform. It's one thing to have discovery, it's one thing to have findability, but the thing we really want is to be able to make things work together and to have some execution. So I will say that in all of this, it has been for the team in EOSC platform a challenging concept. It's not an easy thing to really figure out in an agnostic way. There are plenty of solutions that are very specific. If you want to pick Kepler, or if you want to pick Galaxy, but if you want to be agnostic and allow for multiple ways of executing your workflows, then it's a little bit more difficult. So our intent is to build on the fact that the EOSC platform allows researchers to discover, access services, data sets, and other research products. So the question is how will the platform then help researchers use and combine these services once they have been found? So we'll start with a simple use case, and I'll talk actually about this in a little bit more detail a bit later, but this is the idea of doing data transfer. Gee, I found something interesting, I want to do something with it, and instead of downloading it to my computer, and maybe it's some ginormous file, I want to figure out if I can move it to the place where I want to do some work. This is a piece of many workflows. It's kind of if we can get this to work, we might have some hope of getting the rest of it to work. So it's a necessary first step. So the first red bullet is how to access the data. What are the interfaces that are possible for that? Is authentication needed for a workflow-based access? How will we move the data? What data transfer services are available? Does it work with the data source interface? Can it manage the size of the data? And then finally, how will the data transfer service work with some target storage system? So these are questions that we need to answer and we need to codify in the way that we solve the data transfer service as an example of the execution framework. So we're going to essentially put three compatible EOSC resources together into a series of actions or a combined action, and that'll be a very small workflow. So the idea is that we have in the execution framework a series of, or a set of workflow orchestrators which are designed to solve these specific use cases. And one would, for example, move data sets, access compute. Another one would publish data into a repository, etc. And we would have a collection of these. There are some within our team who have argued about this, that it's not really a thing. It's just a bunch of interoperability framework scripts or things like that. That may be true at the end of the day. But we feel it needs a little bit more focused effort and focused organization so that it is a regularly usable and accessible resource in EOSC platform as opposed to something you kind of have to cobble together as a user. So when you are working with this, you as a researcher will pick one of these workflow orchestrators and then instantiate it. And you'll provide some specific details about what data source you want to grab, where you want to send it to, what are your credentials to allow you to certainly to access the target storage or destination storage location, and possibly to provide authentication credentials and authorization credentials for access to the source data set. So it's a set of orchestration services or workflow orchestrators that make the remote resources dynamically composable. It's an overlay, if you will, on existing capabilities. And it should enable machine composability. In other words, it shouldn't require, aside from the launch, it should not require people to move their cursors, move their mice to make things happen. So just to map it to some of our gory pictures, gory architectural pictures. Oh, here we go. Where are we? So GUI access up here from the consumer who's going to reach into the catalog and marketplace and basically, as well as API access to get to the execution framework. And this will work together with the EOSC Exchange, and as well as the interoperability framework to navigate across all of these things. So I guess I'm going to talk next. I didn't realize I was going to talk next, but I will. About the data transfer in more detail. After that, Paolo is going to discuss consumable resources, which are obviously going to figure rather prominently in these kinds of workflows. Roxana is going to talk to us about bundle and workflow support from the user interface standpoint, and we'd like to have a little bit of a conversation at the end. That's where we do want to come closer together and get some feedback about what pieces are working and what pieces are not working. And that's the end for my introduction. And now I have to put my glasses back on. Hi, I'm Mark Dietrich. Mark Dietrich asked me to talk in a little bit more detail about the data transfer service, so I'll do that now. Some of this you will have seen before in his other slides. I apologize for any duplications. So the objective is pretty clear: enable a transfer of a research product, such as a data set, from its current location, as identified by the catalog, to a storage resource that the user would pick and would be accessible to the user. So data transfer service is a common step in many workflows. We do have this available in beta. We expect to have it in production with a certain amount of flexibility and capability by January. So this is not something we're blowing smoke about. In fact, we did demo it in March, I believe, in the review process. So this is an illustration of service composability. We have a user interface which will allow the user to select a data source, select a target storage service, and then, at least at the current moment, there isn't any choice about the kind of transfer service that you could use, but depending on the choices and what future capabilities are supported within this particular workflow orchestrator, there may be a choice of data transfer service. If you have a preference between grid FTP or straight FTP, those would be choices you might have. So that's the UI. That's going to reach into the EOSC interoperability framework to look for a guideline that's going to speak to, okay, what are the things that I have to choose? How do they work together? Let's put together a series of things that do in fact and can work together. So this is the slide I actually presented in a similar slide to this in yesterday's talk, talking about the interoperability guideline for the data transfer service. So there is a draft of this. We hope to finalize this and publish it and eventually register it into the IF registry and put a DOI on it so it's visible. It's based on a flexible API for data transfer services. This is essentially a wrapper for multiple potential data transfer services. So we're trying to make generic capabilities around different data transfer services. So that's kind of the crux. Well, let me finish this because I've got a bit of an animation to this. So you can see the different source types that are supported. It's not a giant list, but we hope to extend that. But the list is pretty useful right now in terms of any Zenodo or B2Share record, as well as any URL or target location that supports signposting with the right kind of source link. So that covers a big selection of the world. It's not necessarily, I can't give you a percentage obviously, but it does provide quite a lot of capability. In the middle, we're only using the EGI data transfer service because we have, it's based on a resource that EGI has control over, so we can hit it with a hammer if we need to and make it work. And the target storage protocols are WebDAV, which is basically with token, which is basically Dcache, S3 services FTP as well, WebDAV with a username or password, which is essentially the B2Safe protocol. Now, what we need to do, what we'd like to do, and we'll talk about some enhancements, I'll repeat myself here, but we'd like to say, okay, you are user X. Here are a series of resources that conform to this protocol. You have access to this subset of those conformant resources, and therefore we present you with that list, but we're not there yet. So we have to do a little bit of manual navigation on your own, but when we have a more seamless process, it should allow for much easier use and potentially fully machine operability. And finally, authentication is important, and we're, again, currently working with EGI check-in, but we're working also to extend this to the AAI, the EOSC AAI Federation more generally. So the interesting part for this session is this part in the middle. So we're essentially creating a generic wrapper for a specific service. And this is the gist of this these workflow orchestrators, is we're taking classes of capability and we're bundling them together and say, gee, these all smell the same. And we're going to put together a generic API wrapper around them so that we can then call them, and the wrapper can figure out the difference between service X and service Y and give you the same kind of performance. So in this way we create we don't require every workflow to be specific to the specific services. We allow some generic approach or an abstracted approach. So again, EGI data transfer is what's in there now, but our other transfer systems are planned to be added into the execution framework. You know, Globus is a good example. So step by step, you would use EOSC Explorer to find a data set. You'd click on the data transfer icon, and this icon would be presented to you because the data set conformed to the necessary formats that we're supporting, as described on the prior slide. You would then open the data transfer user interface. The DOI would be parsed to retrieve all versions of the data set that are shown. So typically there is a big pile. Right now you get them all. If it's a signpost, you might have 7 versions of something. So you might have a PDF, you might have a tar, you might have a this, that, the other thing, but you'd get all of them. An enhancement is to allow you to select from those, specify the destination storage service, and again, possible enhancement would be to show them the ones to which the user already has access. Start the transfer, and at that point, the user experience isn't quite what we want it to be because we want to provide some capability to monitor the progress of the data transfer. So a possible enhancement or planned enhancement is for the dashboard to monitor the transfer progress and success. So we might, as I mentioned yesterday, we might have a generic process tracking progress bar application, so you'd hand it off and get notifications when things are done or if they failed for some reason. So the platform itself is adding value through multiple integrations in this particular example. So the data transfer service is available to research products in the catalog and marketplace, those that comply with the relevant guidelines. It's a horizontal service. We've talked a little bit about a horizontal service, but it's basically a utility that is useful for researchers from almost any discipline. So this is a great example of that. You really don't have to be from one discipline or another to be able to use this in your work as a researcher. It is enabled by compliance with the EOSC interoperability framework and accessing to the guidelines that are going to be loaded into the registry. And it's in particular the first example of the execution framework itself. So it's enabling composability, and it's illustrating how specific services will be abstracted into the extension framework so they can interoperate. So here's some more fun pictures, which I'm sure you can all read in detail. Anyway, this is a deep dive into our architectural modeling to show where these steps occur, what components are involved, what the sequence of events are. So this is, you know, we're not hand waving. We were hand waving about this for a while ago, but we've actually done quite a lot of work, and it's now quite practical and well defined. And I thank you again for your attention. And who's up next? So, I should reload?
Yes, just open it up. Yes. Okay, thank you. Okay, so consumable resources. First thing, let me say, I'm Paolo, by the way, so it's written there. First thing, the name is to be rethought, okay? So we call them consumable, you will understand why, but probably is not the most proper one, so don't be scared. So this is a bird's eye view of the data model that we have today in the EOSC. So just to give you, again, a refresh on the resources we're dealing with. So we have a resource, we have a provider for that, and we have a service that can be a resource or a product. As you can see, services can be of different kinds, but we have two specific ones which we really care about and we expanded on, which are the data sources and the catalog. This may happen for other types of services in the future, but for the moment, these are the two that we wanted to delve into. And why? Because, for example, in the case of a data source, we have the products that are contained into this data source, which are hosted, deposited there, and from which we can collect the metadata. And the product is a publication, a data set, a software, or other kinds that doesn't really fall in one of these three categories. So this is a very simple picture, keep it in mind. Now, EOS services. They can be digital, of course, but they can also be tangible, physical services. So we may have an office, for example, that is registered to the EOSC because they provide training, for example, training services. They have a provider, of course, so a responsible organization behind, typically represented by a person. That is the same person that onboards the service. Typically a service exposes capabilities or stuff that is useful to the users, okay? So typical example is computing, or again, when we talk about the office, is a person that is giving you a seminar, for example. They differ, therefore, in the typologies of consumables, that's how we call them, that they offer. Okay, and this is actually one key and important aspect of the EOSC, right? So when you reach the EOSC, the marketplace, you find services and then you learn what they can offer to you. And here we come to the first example. So we have a user, for example, that searches for notebooks because he's interested in that and probably also in finding ways to be able to operate a notebook online. He finds this list of results, and under services, I'm not sure you can read it, but we are under the service class category. He finds the EGI notebook. Then he selects it. He has access to the service page. And then, if he scrolls down, she will find the resource offer. So finally, he can now order a notebook for his use. This could be for researchers, for communities. You see there are different options. So this service is offering different kinds of consumables, okay? And maybe to a certain quantity and level. So the service, the user can order one of those according to his own needs, and in doing that, is consuming part of the service offer. So maybe others that are coming later on will not find, you know, all the full offer there. But this process is really good and fine. How does it work? Well, it works in the way that the provider, once she has onboarded the service, can also define the kind of assets that the service is offering. So it goes straight to the page, and that's from the administrative side, so this is the provider, and opens what is called the project, defines, you know, the details of this project, the details of the offers, and once this is defined, this may appear to the user that follows the workflow that I've just shown before. This is actually critical because some of the fields may be common to all these kind of objects that we call consumables, projects through this tooling, but they may differ, so providers can define their own fields because, of course, resources, as we said, differ in typology. So this is cool, but how can we improve? There's something more. We can walk the extra mile that we could do. So today, the first thing that must be noticed is that consumables are not EOSC resources. So as I mentioned in the first slide, resources are services and products. And then there's something that the service offers. So it's a sort of feature or capability that this specific service is providing, okay? So there's no way, since they're not resources, for the user to search them and find them through the marketplace. The only thing that the user can do is to find the service and eventually, at the end, find such resources. So it's a sort of surprise for the user, unless the user knows already, right? So if I find the service that I like, then I will only find out when I open the splash page of the service if I can order something out of it and what is the actual structure and the offer. In this sense, we have a long list of services that probably are offering something, and it's really hard to understand what this something is, and they're not even showing it in terms of a project, like, for example, EGI is doing for the EGI notebook today. I can give an example. The open air monitor, it's a dashboard that can offer gateways to communities. We offer tens of gateways. This is exactly one of those things that should be in a marketplace. Because when I reach there, as a user, I reach that page, I can find out that I can get my own gateway if I only press this button and contact the right people. Well, if instead I read the description of the service, it's quite interesting, but it doesn't actually go beyond that. It's not offering a mechanism for me to interact. I need to write an email to I don't know who, okay? So what can we do in this direction? Well, the idea is to extend the model. In this sense, I'll try to explain what these two red boxes below means. In this sense, we'd like to have a way to define the types of consumables, for example, notebooks, which goes beyond the EGI notebook, so it's a notebook, and to have ways for the services to either select one of the existing templates, one of these existing types, or define their own, okay? This actually helps out to decouple the service from the type of the offer that it can have, and can normalize this thing. It's very similar to the interoperability framework in that sense. We may actually see the consumables project profiles as sorts of guidelines, and we may have different services that are today offering notebooks, matching the same type, and subscribing to the same offer. So what could change? So this is the instantiation. See, the service is EGI notebook. We may have a notebook project profile, and then EGI's notebook could actually provide the list of its own offers. So for researchers, for things that match exactly that template. And the EGI notebook wouldn't be the only service capable of doing so. So basically, the action of the provider, in this case, would be slightly different. So it would have first access to a list of available templates, which of course need governance behind, so it cannot be an explosion of templates, because otherwise it would be useless. Can select one. In this case, it's a template for a notebook, and then can define its own consumable projects. If nothing exists, it can propose a new one, because it's time to have it. For the user searching for notebooks, the marketplace, these are mocks, okay? So I made them using Mac preview, so don't think this is a system. It may change, and the interface is on the side of Cyphernet, but this is just to give you an idea. So you search for notebooks, and as you can see at the top, you also have consumables now, so it's a possibility. So if you click on it, in this case, you get the list of consumables, what today are called projects, offered by the EGI notebook. So the two are completely decoupled from the service. You just land on the service if you want to buy them, okay? So if you want to order them. So it's the opposite view, it's the inverted view with respect to what we have today. It's very similar to Amazon. In Amazon, you have shops and goods, but you search for goods and then you get to the shop, right? While today, it's as if Amazon would also only show the list of shops, and only by clicking on the shops, you would understand which are the goods, right? And this is, so reverting it will actually allow us to do things like this. So if you search for all, that's you know, you just click on search without specifying any keywords, you would have a sort of long list of offers that are made today available by the services with their types on the left side, so you may filter out of this. But as you can see, you could have different types for different services and so on. Okay, so we really believe that this is the right approach to go, to give the possibility to service providers to actually structure the offer and make it tangible, right? So this, I'm not just giving you a service, but I'm giving you something. The examples here are, for example, the open-air training seminars. There's a service out there for that, okay? But when you land on the page, you don't know a thing. In this case, you may have, as a class of open science training seminars, which is broader than the open-air ones, open science, you may have an instance of this with to give you an idea, with a certain period, because maybe the services are available from next year, 1st January 2023 to the end of the year. But I have the possibility of offering them. So if you want, you can benefit out of this. There could be virtual research environments, for example, on demand, that you can request for and be provided with. There can be all sort of stuff that we can identify. So that's it. And that's what we are, the path we're walking. And for next year, probably we will have some results. Thank you for your attention. I'll see you later.
Hello, I'm the last one, Roxana here. And before I go to my presentation, why is it not changing?
You need some help?
Maybe.
You just need to, oh, here.
Okay, thank you.
Nope, not there yet.
No, I want to start with Paulos.
Oh, you want to start with Paulos?
Yeah.
Oh, well then. That's Paulo.
Yep.
Where do you want to be?
At the very end. So I click share, hopefully. Not share, slideshow. Yeah. So I wanted to start with what Paolo showed at the very end to underline that it's all connected here. It's not a coincidence that we are in the same session with capabilities we are showing. Apart from what Mark has shown regarding the data transfer, we are in the process of creating introducing the new concepts we are talking here about. But what is important that all of these concepts lay upon or build upon already existing concepts and implementations. So, two things I wanted to say regarding this maybe. Yeah, this slide. First thing. What is right now in order management is the ability to define the offer. So if you're a provider, sorry, it was in the, yeah. If you're a provider, you can introduce a notion of something that is consumable because you can already show what are you offering in fact, and what would be given in the end to the user. What is missing are two things. The notion of duration, of capacity management, and sorry, three things, the generalization. Because everything that is being handled right now is defined by the provider. Sorry, wrong arrow. The first objective we need to meet, and it's the same for the composability, I will be talking in a second. The first thing we need to come up with is, sorry, the types to understand the model we have here. I will show you in a second what we come with as a result of the analysis, one of the analysis. So what are the types that are eligible for consumability? And second, what is the technical metadata schema behind it? So what what providers should fill in to define the consumables and what users will be able to use when searching for them. This here, what Paolo has very nicely drafted or designed here, is a proposition of the user interface. And that's the next thing I wanted to say. The same idea can be expressed in many ways, especially when it comes to digital solutions in the web. So when it comes to user interface. And what we are trying to deal with, and we will be consulting on, we are consulting continuously, but we want to expand. We want to understand how a given feature or a given capability would be best understood from the user experience standpoint regarding the platform. So this is one of the propositions that might have worked. I would have done it differently, and because there are two different ideas, we will consult which one is better received or understood by people who are supposed to use it, hopefully.
We'll vote later.
And now, execution framework. So yeah, Roxana, this is me, execution framework, bundles and workflow support in EOSC platform. So right now, once we are, again, we were talking about as single instances of things that we are able to use as the researchers using the EOSC platform. Now we are moving one step forward and trying to come up with things that are answering our needs and consist of more than one llama. So we need multiple elements to be combined to serve some real problem of a user. Sorry. When we are talking to researchers, these are the 4 elements that users are mostly aware of, that we have some computing in the digital infrastructure, data, storage, and analytic tool. Yes, what we have noticed, and if Anka was here, she would yell at me how, because she was saying it from the very beginning, that people usually don't understand things unless they are promoted with a not simple language, but language of actions rather than names of the services, even with the best metadata schema. And when the researcher is entering the world, it would be best if the researcher would be able to use these small workflows or these solutions, whatever we will call it, that are aimed exactly in finding the, solving the problem that the researcher came to EOSC trying to solve. So, for example, the first way to approach this idea is to creating a bundles. This notion or this name was taken from the e-commerce world. So bundles as a package of more than one thing that is connected somehow. Sometimes it's connected because it's from one person selling the item. Sometimes it's connected because it goes together very well, like doors and knob. We are closer to the second idea of the bundles. So right now we understand the bundles as the first approach towards the workflows and interoperability, because these are something we call tight integration of services or services and research products to support a given use case. And what the tight integration mean? It means that there's 2 precise services integrated together, and by that integration they are able to serve a bigger purpose. So for example, we have the service called Argos and we have a service called Zenodo. By integrating the two, we are able to show the users that it's available now through EOSC to semi-automatically create a data management plan, DMP, and publish it through Zenodo. And the automatization and added value here is huge, because some of the elements of that needed to be filled in are automatically retrieved from Zenodo, and with that, creating of the data management plan is much easier than it is, especially for many. I don't know whom of you have already done that, but creating the data management plan is not an easy thing for the first timer, especially. So enhancement, something bigger, 2 services and serving a certain purpose for the researcher. And I have shown this, so maybe I will not be too long about that. The bundle is also one step forward when it comes to the access. In term of this one, for example, Zenodo is an open access. You don't need to ask for it. But Argos, not always. Sometimes you need to ask for the permission, need to be authenticated. Authenticated, yes, but sometimes you need to be also authorized. And for that, the bundles will be participating in the order management. And once you ask for a bundle, both parts of the bundle, or both orders, let's call them, will be dispatched to the providers. And what is important, it's not in that case, but when it comes especially to infra services, sometimes it matters when the information about the other service, about the technical parameters, is shared between the providers. And this is what it's done. It's not rocket science, but it wasn't trivial at the same time, being able to share some of the information that are needed to share between the providers to properly instantiate a given integration of services. Here, Notebook. Notebook can be to drop, and this is an interesting thing because Notebook, and this is already available as a bundle. Sorry. Notebook here is something that is under an analytical, but it's not only the analysis itself, and I will get to that in a second. So we have a notebook and B2 drop, so ability to analyze something and then share one store and share with your colleagues from the group that is making the analysis. Then it's, again, you can get them together with one click, and this is the case when the technical parameters exchange between provider is something that needs to take place, because for properly set up the capacity for B2 drop, what we don't have is, okay, and it could be made better on our side because we do not correlate, or we do not at the time constrain the user from choosing a given value depending on values chosen on the other side. And sometimes, just sometimes, choosing some of these values will not be appropriate for the second service. So for now, because again, it's all about the model. To be able to automate things, you need to have a model, and you need to be aware of the fact which things fit, which doesn't. And we cannot do it for a single use case, but what we are trying to do, or will try to do at least to some extent, is to get a model of the composability. And now, here is what we came up with kind of basic but already complex workflow that could have been supported hopefully in EOSC pretty soon, maybe not pretty soon, but soon enough that we can live and see that. So we have data, we have transfer services, analyzing them, then storing maybe, publishing, either after the analyzed part when you want to publish the data, or after the store part if you are working on your publications, and in the meantime you store the data and the publications itself later, and then you publish your results. And for the analysis thing, and this is something that I will talk about in a second, for analysis you have also another box connected. It's better, faster computing HTC or other, but HTC is the most common case in that for analysis in EOSC. And we wanted to start small, so we started to ask people, the researchers, and they always started with the data, that what they are coming for is either the data at hand or data to look for. So the data is our starting point. And then what you will do with the data once you have it? Well, I will either publish it, if that's the data I just produced and I want to share it with the world, or I'm looking at the data to try to make something with it and have my own findings with the data I have found. So I need to analyze it. And that's the two simple workflows we have started with. But with this, two simple workflows, many questions already arise. And that's the matter of model I was talking about. Because when you're thinking about processing and processing services that we have in one of our exercise recognized in the catalog, analyzing service, it's not always the same. Because to analyze things, to process data, you need to have different capabilities. You need to have the processing tool itself, so let's call it a software. But you need to have a computing to run the analysis. You need to have a storage. In case of big data, you need to have an online storage to be able to exchange data once the processing part is taking place, and the transfer capabilities. All of these elements can be a part or parts of this of a thing that now we recognize as a process and analyze service, but so far we don't have the information which capabilities are served under that service. And for the sake of interoperability and being able to tell the user if he gets everything to create a consistent environment, these are the information we need to know, because if this service that we have under process and analyze don't have the computing power big enough to support the data brought by the user, we would need to suggest that for your whole use case to make place, please add computing resources. So we need this kind of information for the services themselves in the metadata to be able to create a proper workflow model and to be able, because what is the goal? The goal is for us to be able to tell the user what is a full environment that the user needs. So the user is able to execute what is needed. So again, the model, not trivial. When you want to publish something, there are again some things you need to ask about. So what is the size of accepted data set, existence of DOI, if it's free or not free, the domain the repository, for example, is supporting, if there is a security aspect included, time span when that will be available for you to store. All of these elements were recognized as important for the users when choosing a service that is about publishing capabilities. And these are only two less complicated workflows we are talking about. And I will be finishing soon. This is our first recognition of actions that we found important from the user standpoint, that when the researcher comes, the language that the researcher might recognize is, I want to come to EOSC and do processing, publishing my data set, data management, anonymization of my data. Very many respondents included anonymization as a single action of interest. Move or storage my big data, use efficient computing resources, discover or reuse the data, make your repository findable in open science, and produce the data with the use of physical instruments. So this is the first, let's call it, finding, and then we need to fit that findings into the model. So in the end, we are able to introduce the first full kind of full model of what we would like to include for the execution framework. And again, what Mark has said, it's something more tangible probably. What I'm showing you here is that at some point we would like to, based on for example, a template of a given problem to solve, be able to show bricks connected with that template. So okay, to solve this kind of complexity of a problem, you will need data, transfer service, analytical service, publishing capabilities and storage capabilities and computing capabilities. So most of them, right? And what we would like to achieve with the use also of the interoperability framework, once you bring the data, you know, data have its format, etc. We want to be able to tell which elements under transfer service are able to move to your data to a service that is capable of processing your data. And then publishing, it's not that, okay, publishing maybe it's not the complex thing here, but storage and computing are falling under the same questions and things to be recognized. Yeah, and I think it would be all from me. We will start small. We will start with implementation of something closer to these two workflows at hand. But what we need the most is the recognition of the use cases. So knowing who can come to us with what, and with that knowledge we will be able to design the model a little bit better, with more accuracy. Thank you.
Thanks, Roxana. So shoot. Can we have the... So here's a question for all of you. Here are some, this is like crimes against humanity. Here are some cards in our deck. Are there cards missing? I mean, major cards. Are there major categories of services that you experience in your research work that wouldn't be covered by some, you know, the 3 of data, the 5 of compute? You know, you have some combination of a card deck that you could put together. Is there a suite missing here? Matthew? Oh yeah, where I'm the microphone. Hold on. Oh, thank you.
I'm not sure where I would put it, but a major part of our workflows is manual curation, so not just automatic processing of the analysis, but some interaction with the data and enrichment and so on. So,
so sort of an interactive step. Where
yes,
you would
yes,
say,
human
here's your results, and then you do some things, and then you carry on with the next stage, which may be automated.
Yeah, yeah,
okay,
and that's oftentimes part of the, like also in the training data, active learning and so on, so where you need to iteratively combine manual and automatic steps.
Okay, so I do want to take questions, but any other examples of a card flavor that we're missing?
So I think
you have a card?
that also to the related to the evolution of the data, I would say that the research objects are much more appropriate as an entry point into this whole process of the storage. And I would say that you have to have an entry point, and the research objects are sort of entry point to describe and then to include your data and include the processing. And that brings us to the sort of cascading services that are connected to the, that you could connect on, based on the actual requirements associated with your research. You can include the methodology, you can include the software, you can include the data, and you have the rich metadata to describe that, and that is findable. So that I think that maybe the view here should not be that you can shuffle your cards wherever you like, but have the entry point with the ready linked services together that would help you to in your process, in the scientific process, essentially. Thank you.
Okay, just to reply to Raimundas quickly. So so what you're suggesting is something orthogonal to this. So this is a different view of what we're trying to offer. So this is a let's say, a way we're trying to filter through common lens what's inside the EOSC exchange, which today is a mass of services and products, and via common lens be able to combine classes of services to reflect what scientists are doing. So to organize their thinking when they access the exchange, because otherwise it's just a huge amount of services. So research objects are a good way of publishing, and which, by the way, can differ from community to community, and would certainly fall if you have a research object service behind the publish card. And also afterwards, and this is why I wanted to ask a question, also maybe there's another aspect not missing but probably hidden in these cards, which is the discovery part. So when you write data there, and data here is generic, it's not just research data, okay? So the data is everything that can be useful to a user. Is there implicit the fact that we are going to discover the data? So are these discovery and access services, or this is a question for Roxana?
Yes, so again, what I was trying to show here is only one way to reach the execution frameworks. Of course, the discovery part will be parallel way to get there, to the framework. It was not included here, but you need to discover properly data before that, because no one will tell you out of the box what kind of data you would like to have. And to Raimunda's, again, research objects are very cool, but this is not the problem at hand we are trying to solve. We are trying to come up with a model that will support the workflows. Many people or many projects are handling this, but as Paolo said, we are trying to understand what we have at hand in EOSC regarding the resources and allow researchers to more easily understand what they can do with them to achieve the goal that they have personally. So become a closer. It's really, apart from the modeling exercise we need to do with the data, and it's a common one, also it combines with the consumable resources that Paolo has been introducing. It's all about understanding what we are having, trying to find a common model for it, trying to make or ask providers to come along and express them in the same way, unless we, or as long as we don't introduce it as a part of the platform itself, and we make you do that because there will be no other way. And yeah, it's a very cool analytical exercise that has a lot of dimensions of data at hand, because it's about different kinds of resources, different kinds of connections between them, different kinds of being able to express the resources. And this expression will help in the discovery, because once we will know that maybe the storage service, the most important elements are the amount of storage or type of storage, we will let the users, the researcher, search and discover via this parameter, which would be much better user experience than what we have now. And it doesn't mean we have nothing, because we have something. Now we need to make one step further and be better.
So let me, I want to pick up on Matty's suggestion about the interactive step and generalize it to visualization. So visualization, and there are two kinds of visualization. One is when I create a plot. Boom, it's an output. It's just a plot. It's just a picture. I print it out on my pretty printer, and I look at it, and I take my ballpoint pen and I circle some things. Now, what if we were also to have visualization with selection? Okay, here are the outliers. I want to actually click on those and go to the next stage of my analysis with the outliers to see what they really are. Or alternatively, I want to draw a big circle around the K closest neighbors and say, no, this is the center of our analysis, and we're going to summarize there. We're going to ignore the outliers. So there's that process, and maybe we do it manually through the visualization process, and then the second time we do the process, we say, okay, now we're going to do a formal nearest neighbor analysis to sort of quantify the mechanism that we use to come up with this cluster of results. So I can see that being a couple of things being there, not just straight output, one directional visualization, but also interactive and sort of visualization as selection. Jonathan.
Matthew was kind of first.
Matthias first then.
Thank you. I just would kind of take, well, not offense, but I would like to pick a bone with that kind of lumping together the data entering, what I meant as data. So it's much more pedestrian what I meant. It's like edit forms where you really create data, or in humanities you have like an XML file where you enter annotations. So it's like, it's not visualization in a kind of, you have some results and then you can interact with them, but it's really like creating new typing. You can imagine it as typing into forms. That's something that people do, indeed.
So we will contact you.
You're writing all this down.
Can I, John?
Right, Jonathan Tedds from Elixir in EOS Life. So the thing I wanted to raise is, which I think actually connects with something Paolo said and Raimunda's, which is there's something about the way we're presenting this here that implies that researchers go to this environment and then move around in it. If you were a normal researcher, that's how it would look, this presentation. Nearly all researchers will be working in their existing environment, and they have obviously sets of familiar tooling, institutional services, whatever it is. So the discoverability and the research objects becomes really important, because that's how it's through those methods that they go to find the things they need, but they don't have in their current environment, or that maybe EOSC is making available more easily. And so I think that's why you're hearing these points, that no one's disputing that this kind of interconnected network of services. We're also having a tricky time in Elixir thinking about, we now think we're going to have service collections and service bundles. Collections being sets of things used together, bundles being actually interoperable, things that we know work together, are compatible. Just for, oh, okay, you've had that debate as well. Anyway, but you see the point I'm making is that I think for a much wider set of research users, if we consulted upon this execution framework, I think there's definitely, you can imagine many researchers in many situations who could benefit, who could definitely benefit, who don't have, you know, maybe not in a larger institution or in a discipline where they have access to this kind of set of rich resources. And so what I'm arguing is that we need to sort of join those worlds.
So the part you're saying is that for the existing communities with existing tools, the part they're missing, the part they're missing is the stuff that they can't find in those tools.
So a single element, Paolo?
So
that's an interesting idea.
again,
So
it's the same answer that I get to Raimunda's. It's a different level. So of course, research objects are just one example. I can mention Galaxy workflows. Okay, so it's another thing, which is good. It's been published. It's used in local environments, and for these you have very specific use cases. Here, instead, we are trying to, again, when you're prompted with a huge amount of services, it's very rarely that you get to a place like this, like the marketplace could be, and try to build on your own let's say the pipeline of services that you need, okay? So it's much better, and maybe you are also invited to do it, if you can follow an ideal, very high-level workflow with specific criteria, and the system will suggest you what you can do with some degree of compatibility. So we're not saying that we are producing workflows on demand here, right? So this is not the case. But it's just a way to offer the end user a better experience when accessing a huge pool of services that, as we said before, are completely different kinds. Different disciplines, but some are digital, some are not. So at the moment, it's like when you look at the RDA working groups, right? It's just a huge mass of things that are interconnected, and some services, for example, may hook to different cards, right? And you maybe find, so we are trying to find the right balance between a reasonable approach to access the marketplace and reusing some form of compatibility, interoperability. Again, we're not aiming at creating workflows on demand across services published by different research infrastructures with different APIs. This is a dream that not even Google can solve today, okay? Unless you all match to the same framework, which is, of course, not what we want, because communities, as you said. So keep it that way. So research objects are fantastic. I hope, and I'm talking about researchobjects.org, I'm talking about other approaches that are similar to this. There's Discos, there's many. These are amazing. Let's go for them. Let's publish them in data. And let's have the services in here under processing, under publishing, because it's useful for the users to find them. But it's a different level. Okay?
John, but
I just want, wait. I just want to sort of clarify. I want to pose the question to Jonathan. What I heard from Jonathan was...
Why are you interrupting me?
Pardon me?
I only wanted to say one more sentence that it's relevant before you change the context. Sorry. What I wanted to underline here is that what we are showing here doesn't mean that what the use case you are describing is not existent, because it is. It's just not in the scope of this session, but definitely, especially, we are also trying to work as extensive as possible with the communities, and we know you have your own infrastructures with your own solutions, and you're more often seeking for a single elements for your puzzle, and it will be still, it's now available, and with that we want to understand what might be the name of the brick you can stick for the sake of better discovery, also for this type of the user. So what we are saying...
Why are you stealing my points?
Because I wanted to be better than you this time.
No, the point is, I think it'd be lovely to be able to take, for a researcher in Elixir to say, I've got these 7 things that I'm working with, and I'm wondering if there's anything that's like it.
Yeah, that's another.
And then feed it into the recommender system as a you know, customers who bought this also
Listen,
bought
Raymond,
this.
and Martin. That's a good.
So that is exactly
cool
what you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yes, please, gentleman in the back with the microphone.
So this might not be part of the researcher's workflow, but I think it would fit the overall life cycle. After publishing, is there anything that helps reviews or validation?
Like peer-to-peer review is something we are thinking about, for example, but we don't have services for that. That's not fixed. Really, I'm a loud person. So we don't have it. We didn't find it among the services we have. We know about the peer-to-peer review and its importance, but we don't have anything in EOSC right now that's under that category. But once we do, it will be added.
Yeah, I was just throwing it out there as the idea of what might be the missing blocks.
Another card.
And typically, it's part of publishing, though. So it's one of the capabilities offered by publishing.
I would prefer this is not just a session that I never heard about this, but would prefer this with discussion, technical discussion. So what you prefer, that I be critical or constructive?
I think constructive.
Constructive, okay. Okay, so what I see, what missing in this analysis, blocks may be more or less relevant, to understand how many time a researcher will spend on each of these blocks. I'm looking at my computer. This is not different from, for example, Windows Explorer or whatever, my computer, my Python Jupyter notebook. What has been I would like to have that this helps me to, make time saving on repeating work. Mostly will be done between analysis and compute. Maybe data move. All others are just occasional. I will publish my data once per month. I will publish my, archive my results once per 2 months. I will receive my data after months of experiment, maybe once, and will work half a year on this diagram. So automation needs to be done in a way to maximum save time of repetitive work. So not only, how is normally research is done? If we go through workflow, language, experiment workflow, we do the step by step, and we actually acquire the program. It will be tested at the moment it is ready. How is Jupyter Notebook works? Whatever I did already recorded in the sequence, and even example of my run code. And this part is missing. Automation not only from platform, but automation based on user development, on user, how it's called, progressive work.
Just a quick comment, and that is that we're not thinking about the automation. We're simply saying, well, what is it that it's going to be automated? So we have to decide or figure out what the steps are. So I think that's we haven't come to that point yet, but that's the objective for sure.
Yeah, it's a very good, no, I think I understand. It's a very good remark. But again, there are like 2 steps or 2 use cases we want to or try to support. First, someone is coming to EOSC with a given research problem in mind, and the person wants to check if everything that that person thinks will be needed could be found here, or if they need to look elsewhere. That's first use case. What you are talking about is this specific, this kind of elements or workflows or whatever we will call them. So we want to create something that will be used at a given moment for a not endless period of time. That's how I understood you. Because when someone is coming, and we cannot plan or we cannot perform every element in that very general workflow, right? We cannot at the same time analyze and then store and publish in the very small amount of time. But probably what will be executable and what will become executable are the smaller workflows about transferring data only, or processing data only, or publishing data only. This will be something that's executable with a single click, not the everything.
Okay, I came here to listen and maybe to know something new about executable. For me, executable also means a different point of view. What I explained is executable from a point of view of researcher. For me, executable, what I did actually helps me to execute whatever I did repeating. And this is how it's called. Research reproducibility. This reproducibility, it should be a core for actually what is done at EOSC platform. We are solving this problem in, or will be solving this problem in new research infrastructure slices. We will be solving.
So what I think you've just said.
Hopefully you will solve before we solve. Otherwise it will be kind of a strange situation. Another point of view. Executable, this is executable, I don't know from which point of view. Maybe from data point of view, what with diagram. Where is executable meaning for me? Also from point of view of system. Where system has an executable module that's typically called orchestration that run all processes. So at least 3 points of view of term executable.
Yeah, so we're picking away at a couple of those perspectives. We're not presenting a complete framework. We're looking at specific perspectives and trying to get an understanding from the community here as a starting point of whether we think whether we're going in the right direction. So that's our purpose.
Okay,
So a point I wanted to make is that this assumes something very big. The assumption is that we have fair services, we have fair resources, and we have fair data. I suspect that we're not quite there yet. If you have a look at what's already in the resource catalogue, there's a lot of stuff there that is not adequately fair for this to work. But, you know, that is something we need to check in order to implement this. I think that this is quite a static concept. In that it's looking at what happens at one point. For it to work, I think it does also need to be dynamic. For example, the data needs to be properly annotated, it needs to be properly curated, and any resulting data from new processing likewise needs to be done so this can work in the future. But one very quick point I'd like to say is, you've mentioned use cases that this needs to be tested upon. I think that before use cases happen, there needs to be a consultation with the different communities, and this needs to happen right away, I should think. It needs to be validated.
Okay, to respond, and probably then we need to talk about it offline because it's too much of a complex discussion. So we are approaching it from two sides. One side is this one, which is very high level. So it's nothing that is going to be automatically executed here, okay? It's a suggestion on what are the components that could be possibly useful to you if you want to perform this workflow, okay? So starting from this, there's a mesh that is done between this frame and the content of the exchange, and you get a response that will tell you, look, if you're working in this domain, if you're using this metadata, if you're these are the services that may be useful to you if you want to store these kind of things. Then it's up to the user, as you said before, I liked it, it's the user that is executing here. So it's up to the user to understand how this can be combined, because it's a potential interoperability. Now, workflow orchestration is a completely different story, and it's something we're working on. It's expected to be a prototype at the end of the project, according also to the description of activities. And we will have a few use cases, and it's much more complex, of course. Why? Because Elixir has its own workflow mechanisms, which are perfectly fine, and we don't want to take over those. Those guys working in energies, they have their own stuff. So the EOSC will never come and say, from today on, We want all your services to be interoperable, executable. This will never work. Communities are strong, they have experience, they have their own stuff. This is not going to work. So the whole approach behind the interoperability framework in the EOSC is in fact to go towards this vision. So to provide the tools for those who want to make their services effectively orchestrable to do it, okay? And we are going to have examples of this. So services will come with more technical descriptions, configurations, templates of configurations, and instances of this configuration. If communities, and I mean here different infrastructures, agree on some of these, they can do the magic. And we can build orchestrators as a new thing on top of the EOSC. So the novelty of the EOSC will be that finally we have a place where all services will be there. There's a chance that we can describe more about it if the communities agree on that. And we can build orchestrators on top. And we will have examples of those. Hopefully some concrete examples, actually things that we can borrow from our own experience and make them work. So we can discuss about this, but there are the two views and we fully agree with you. They're both very important, but we need the communities to agree. We cannot impose. So that's why we're providing the tools for them to agree and build.
So maybe more of a concrete question. In your vision, who will own the configuration of particular bundle? Will that be attached to the particular user who sort of picks it and puts it all together? Or will that be owned by the user? Will that be owned by the service provider? So that's one question. Or will that be owned by EOSC, who will somehow define the predefined bundles? So that's one. And two, that requires that all of these types of services would publish their interoperability frameworks, if you will, of APIs, data formats, and so on, publicly. So who will own those? Because, I mean, if I'm also from the service provider perspective, if I want to enrich my service and see that it's combinable with some other services, like for example, if I have the compute service, I want to be combinable with the storage services that are available in the, so how do I do that? So how do you see this framework working from this perspective? So two questions: who will own the bundles and who will define the interoperability?
I can answer the second. The bundles are for Roxana. Yeah. So the second is what happens in any orchestration framework. Users agree on what has to be provided in order to enable the interoperability, and service providers do the work, which is matching the expectations and providing the parameters necessary to be discoverable on that, in terms of that compatibility, and be reusable. And this will be enabled by the kind of tools that we're building, which are generic enough. Then it's up to the community to define which are the parameters, which are the necessary agreements, which are the necessary APIs. We just provide the tools to expose such agreements and the related parameters. Okay, and this can happen across different resources, different services. For example, OEA IPMH is a known protocol. You may have it out there as an interoperability framework. A service may say, I'm compatible with this, and this is my endpoint for it. Okay, so I can find the service in the EOS marketplace, machine can do that, find the ones that are compatible with it, and eventually access them because they have the endpoint. The owner, we can discuss it. I think it's, if I publish this, it's because I want others to use it, so it's going to be free, probably free license, etc. And the ownership will be of the provider, I guess, because they're putting things into their own profile. But that's let's say, a side problem. For the bundles?
Yeah, a quick answer, and I will only add my thought on what Paolo has said. And don't forget, please, that we are working on that. So there are many possible answers, but how I see also the interoperability part, it's not said that we don't have interoperability right now, because we do. if you watched the slides of Paolo's that were including the marketplace projects, you already can include many services in one project, which is an assumption that these services will be working together. But without any information like that we have just presented, it's on users' side to try to make them work together. Nobody is saying to the user or promising to the user that they work, but it doesn't mean that they won't. The user can go to the providers and say, hey, I have this cool use case, please make somehow that the services work for me because I need these capabilities. And this is the level we are at now. And the next level is trying to, again, it's more about user experience and making things faster than about solving some precise research problems, but solving this, let's call it experience problem, does imply doing things more complex on the technical side. As you have noticed, yes, it will be about the interoperability framework, but when one of the ideas of mine, again, it doesn't necessarily will take place, is if you will choose a template but again, it's about not running the workflow, but it's about creating a package where you will put different elements in order to use them for your science, not executing the workflow. That's not that step yet. So, for example, for my research, I know I will use these elements, and I know that they are needed. And the interoperability framework, what we will try to do is define the metadata behind the offers or consumable resources, so once they match, the boxes, once they match, we would know that if the user chooses them and try to make it happen, it will work. And the idea is that you would be able to, so UX speaking, you will have you will have your data, you will have your move element, and there should be list of services that are supporting this kind of data with means of transfer. For the EOSC transfer service, let's say it will be out of the box, it will be as a box here. But for analysis, for the processing part, for the data and the transfer part, not every service in the catalog will be supporting this kind of data. So there you will have a smaller view or smaller list of elements of services that are able to process your data. But if you choose something else from the catalog, because you will be adding the elements to your project from the different entry from the catalog side. The idea is that if things are compatible or interoperable, there will be a link between them. If it's not, the link will not be there. But it doesn't mean you cannot add this element. And who will be in charge of that? Well, I would say it's provider, especially for the bundles, because when it comes to the bundles, what the bundles are right now is something that we know needs to work. When the user asks for the bundles or services integrated, we know it needs to work once it's instantiated. And it's a provider who is giving us the information what this working is about. If it's about providing 2 terabytes of storage place or only 500 gigabytes. So provider. And for this part, provider as well, I would say.
Thanks. I want to get the last 2 questions in. So, Matti, you had a question? Yeah. Oh, yours first? Okay, fine.
Okay.
Quick.
Okay, very quick. So, constructive suggestion. I'm listening users and how's it called, community or whatever. What does mean community user? Who this user and who this community? At least there is a very good example how to actually reach a user community in real. This is find a community.
Okay. EOSC Future has
a champion. Okay.
So your EOSC Future has very specific communities that it already works with.
No, I'm saying that you need to work with so-called champion communities, champion users.
Okay.
Majority of here is not champion users. I'm also not champion user. Maybe I will become in some time.
Okay, well, so
but exactly this type of users, type of community will bring the maximum contribution.
Okay, thank you. Matti.
Thank you. Just want to bring in one more thing, and that is maybe kind of, I'm not sure it's the card or kind of a next card, or if it's actually turning around a bit and touching on the topic of containerization and Dockers, so that oftentimes basically all of the, or more and more, you see all the workflows packaged into a Docker, and then you basically can just share the Docker Compose, the kind of configuration file or the images, and then somebody takes those and can continue working with them and further evolve them, and so the whole complexity of these workflows is hidden, so to say, in a package.
Okay,
and how to, yeah.
That's a good concept. Okay, thank you. So we have 2 minutes.
To ask a very specific question, because we were wondering, while speaking with people very often were mixing up the storage here with the storage here, and what we are two different kinds. Exactly. But what I wanted to ask about is this triangle: storage, move, compute. Is it true in your use cases that in fact this storage should be close to this computing, that is important to you? For whom this would be true, that this storage, let's call it long time storage, should be close to computing elements? Do we have a use case like that in the room?
Majority of analytics it's actually works this special storage that is, if you talk about big data and other suggestions, think about design from the point of view of big data.
Okay, that's another thing.
If it's big data,
can we come back?
It's a big data, you need to special storage and run analysis closer to the storage. And this will be specific.
Why?
Because data gravity. If storage a couple of tens of terabytes, you cannot move them to compute.
I'm not talking about storage for the sake of computing.
No, you're asking is...
Yeah, it's about storing things because you cannot store them in your own facility. It's about moving somewhere for a longer time after making computations. It's more archiving here.
Archiving should be somewhere.
Anywhere,
in a
right?
Special.
Okay.
Special
okay.
place.
So I wanted to thank you. Any more comment?
It's okay. I think we close the session. Talk during coffee. No, but think this is then what we always see with this kind of figures, which are somehow high level. We see storage, and everyone thinks it's something different. This is high performance storage, which has to be my computing space with petabytes of data, and another one just sees, well, there's archiving. You know, this is totally different things if we talk about storage. So what is real-time storage, or processing storage? What is things in there when we publish things, we put it to Zenodo. At the end, most data will end up in a tape library probably, and that's archiving at the end. It's even not backup, it's archiving. Be a little bit more precise, and all these terminologies would help a lot the community. This is just a general comment.
This is exactly what we are trying to do.
Yeah, this is.
We are not making it right, but this is what we are trying to do.
Yeah, this is just a comment at the end. And I think something is missing, by the way. We will see in the future a lot of data is not being a file, but being streams. And this is not in there.